Chris and Julia Dawkins farm the Pyramid. It's a high-performance unit that's just completed 3 years as a monitor farm. For 7 months of the year, the property is in soil moisture deficit. But in spite of that, the climate is tailor-made for sheep breeding and finishing. Chris explains.
We're a 450 hectare dryland property at the confluence of the Avon and Waihopai rivers in the Waihopai Valley. We're about 30k south-west of Blenheim. We're currently standing at about 250 metres above sea level. We're summer dry. Probably average about 780 millimetres of rainfall annually, but unfortunately our limiting factor is we'd spend about 7 months of the year in a soil moisture deficit situation, so reasonably short growing season in the spring. The climate is tailor-made for sheep farming, particularly breeding and finishing. Marlborough is able to achieve fairly good lamb growth rates between birth and weaning, and because of the summer dry nature of the district, we tend to kill as many lambs as possible at weaning time. Yeah, so I guess our competitive advantage is probably lamb growth rates during the spring. Bought the property in 1978 from my parents. Was a really good backbone in place in terms of a fertiliser program, the start of subdivision. Anything that had been done well. I was able to capitalise on that with a major regrassing program that involved converting the native river flats that hadn't been touched at that stage. They were pretty much just in two paddocks. Converted them to lucerne. Once had 80 hectares of lucerne up and away, was able to move up onto the flats here. 25% of the property are stony river flats adjacent to both the Avon River and also the Waihopai River. Reasonably recent soils, not a lot of topsoil over gravels. Don't hold moisture at all in the summer. Consequently, the deeper tap-rooted lucerne is our species of choice here. This paddock's currently undergoing renovation and will go back into lucerne in the spring. The cattle operation is rather variable in that we tend to run a reasonably stable flock of sheep, and then cattle numbers vary depending on available feed, and that they're basically used as vacuum cleaners to soak up any surpluses. At the moment, we tend to be focusing more on dairy support, in that it does tend to complement a dairy operation that we're involved in, leasing a property dairy farm in Murchison. It's very much driven by objective targets. The bulls themselves have to be up to a minimum weight as far as being a suitable size for breeding purposes as a yearling, and likewise the heifers certainly have to maintain specific targets. It can be difficult to carry through the summer, hence the breeding bulls works reasonably well in that they tend to leave the property for the summer breeding season, don't come back to the autumn. Generally speaking, it's not difficult to winter cattle here. We tend to be a little bit drier and normally a reasonably mild winter. We've targeted 15% of the property that was not as suitable for grazing purposes, so fenced it off and retired it and planted it in trees, mainly production-orientated trees. Initially, was very keen on the alternative species, but they had their problems with cypresses tend to be prone to canker in this environment, and the eucalypt varieties that we chose were a bit of a challenge. So through a process of elimination, we've probably ended up concentrating more on radiata. The ideal was, and we're now in a situation where we can harvest 1,000 tonnes of wood annually, and the timber being the only product we produce that's not perishable, so we've got a certain degree of flexibility as to whether or not we meet the market. We're primarily a Corriedale-based flock. This country naturally has always accommodated either mid-micron sheep or merino at the finer end. Tends to probably produce better wool than it does prime lambs, but with the development of the property, we've been able to produce a reasonable number of prime lambs. So it's pretty simple, Corriedale and terminal size. This is a mob of ewes that have been scanned as having either triplets or quads. We like to draft them out at scanning time and manage them separately from here right through to lambing. This is an opportunity to actually get them off farm so as to be able to build up our own covers on farm to lamb down on. And just on the opposite side of the road to us, there is the opportunity for vineyard grazing as a tool that the vineyard people use to clean up in the vineyard in terms of taking out weeds and suppressing the grass growth around the perimeter. Quite keen on legumes. We need the legumes to drive our whole pastoral system. Over the years we've built up our soil fertility to a level where the phosphate levels are quite capable of supporting a more dominant legume pasture. Their requirements are much greater than the grass species. So I think it's the legumes that are giving us our reasonable lamb growth rates. Unfortunately, the perennial clovers don't really want to be here with our dry summers and prolonged periods of moisture deficit, so it's the annual clovers that have been giving us good results. Subterranean clover, balanza, arrowleaf clover, all with good effect. Have 4 sons. 2 of them are keen on the agricultural industry. One currently involved in a equity partnership in Southland milking cows. As far as succession is concerned, it's a difficult one in that I really enjoy the industry. I can't wait to get out of bed in the morning and get back into it. This is actually a gap period for me in that I left college in 1970 and decided to come home on the farm whilst I decided whether I wanted to be an accountant or an architect. And I guess 40 years later I still haven't quite decided. But ultimately, I guess I could go down that track, but I'm just having too much fun at the moment to worry too much about retirement or succession. But are conscious of the fact that we've got 4 sons that are keen in one way or the other.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.